The Fat Electrician. I've reacted to Fat Electrician several times back when I was still a PNG tuber, and I always enjoy his videos. I always end up learning a lot, and it's always a very good time. He's a very entertaining creator. I really like his stuff, and it fuels my interest in history quite a bit. I have no idea who this guy, Matt Urban, is, so I am going to learn quite a bit this video. And for those watching on stream right now, I will be leaving a link in the chat. For those watching on the video after the fact, I will be leaving a link in the description. Please do go check it out. Go support the original creator. Give it some watch time. It's always very appreciated. Let's get started.
Everybody knows about Audie Murphy, but nobody knows about this guy who arguably has more military decorations than him.
To be fair, I only know about Audie Murphy because of the Fat Electrician's video on him.
Today we're talking about Matt Urban, aka The Ghost. I know what you're thinking. How do you acquire the nickname The Ghost? I'll give you a hint. It's because he has 7 purple hearts.
Jeez. That's crazy. Like, so I wonder how many of them, because, you know, for those who may not be aware, I imagine most of you watching do know this, but a Purple Heart is an award you get when you're in the military and you get injured in combat.
Was legitimately unkillable. He was once read his last rites on the battlefield by a priest after the surgeon said that he was for sure going to die. He then proceeded to survive, get shipped off to England, recover in the hospital, where he then escaped from the hospital, made his way back across an ocean, and hitchhiked to the front lines of World War II to rejoin his men.
That's
and that
fucking
is one
insane.
of the 2 times that he escaped from the hospital to return to his men in frontline combat.
'Tis but a scratch. A scratch? Your arm's off!
In addition to his 7 Purple Hearts, he also has the Medal of Honor, the Legion of Merit, 2 Silver Stars, 3 Bronze Stars with V device, and the French Croix de Guerre. As an infantryman,
that's
he has
crazy.
A
That's
kill against an enemy
absurd.
fighter plane. He also has 2 confirmed
Getting
kills.
one of those is considered impressive. Jesus.
On enemy tanks that he took out by himself on foot. He once participated in an amphibious landing, which to be fair doesn't really sound that impressive until I tell you that he didn't do it in a Higgins boat like everybody else. Him and his new buddy Al Shellbach made the amphibious landing by themselves inside of a fucking rowboat for reasons that we're going to get into right after a word from our sponsor.
That's amazing. Okay, and again, just to be clear, I'm going to be letting the ad read play out of respect for the creator and because Fat Electrician's ad reads are always very funny, but I do not know anything about this product or this service aside from what it does, so I can't speak to its quality or anything like that, so this is his endorsement, not mine. Also, I do appreciate the trigger discipline by Fat Electrician's wife. That is always appreciated. We like gun safety on this channel as well.
Again.
My what?
Your Mustang armament, Chesty.
Oh, yeah. I got something so it's kind of quiet for kids' is nap time.
Yeah, where did you get a suppressor? You can't just buy those.
Don't worry about it.
No, I have to worry about it. It's like legalities and stuff, Hannah.
It's like that Lil Wayne quote.
Little Wayne quote. Real G's move in silence like lasagna? You're a housewife. All right, you guys know the deal. Delete Me. Online subscription model. You give them money every month.
I will say she
make sure that data brokers on the internet
is a
aren't
great
selling
part
your
of
personal information. What does
his
this
ad
actually
reads.
do in
She
practice?
seems to have a
Gets
lot
rid
of fun with it.
Personal info isn't just floating around the internet for anybody to be able to buy for a couple of bucks. Okay, I know what you're thinking because I thought the same thing. I don't want to give Delete Me all my personal information either. I'm trying to get my personal information off the internet. Why would I give it to an internet company? You don't really have to give them your personal information. It's honestly kind of creepy. I gave them my name and my email
Got a cat on my
address,
desk.
and that was it. They came back to me a couple of days later and was like, is this your address or one of your previous addresses? It was. Is this your mom's full name? Uh-huh. Is that your dad's full name?
Oh, sorry.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Are you related to this person? Did you go to this high school? They knew everything about me and knew exactly who I was. Just by me
has
giving them my
lately
name and my
been.
email. All I had to
gotta
do was answer a couple of yes or no
knock
questions
my
as to whether or not that was in
headphones
fact me, which it was. At which
plug
point
out.
they're like, cool, go
There we
ahead,
go.
pay for our subscription service. We'll go to all the data brokers.
Sorry,
where
my
we found
cat.
this information.
I got to explain what just happened there because my cat. I have 2 monitors on my desk, and then in between that, I have my the camera that I use to, you know, do my face tracking and all that. That's on like a little cardboard box that's taped to the wall, and I have another light on top of that to make sure that's, you know, the area is always well lit. For some reason lately, she's been trying to go in between the monitors and in behind my right monitor, which is up against the, not up against the wall, but like there's nothing between it and the wall. I don't know why she is so insistent on going there. There is literally nothing back there, but she does it like at least once a day. And I always have to grab her and just put her onto the side because I don't want her getting stuck back there or fucking with my wires and all that shit. And it was actually kind of funny, the VTube Studio, the tracking for a second, because I had to pull her in front of the camera, it's thought that she was me. So the tracking temporarily followed her, and that's why it looked like I went up really close to the camera. So yeah, I had to explain why that happened.
And force them to delete it. And as long as you keep being a paying member, they will continue to monitor all these data brokers for your personal information, and if these data brokers do acquire it again, they will force them to delete it again. In my opinion, it's definitely worth it. I've been using them since before they were paying me to talk about them, and I'm going to keep using them after they quit paying me to talk about them. If you want to give it a try, I'll have a link and a discount code down below. Let's get back to the video.
So yeah, if you want to support the Fat Electrician, that's one way to do it. But just keep in mind, I'm not endorsing the product. I don't know anything about it.
Okay, here's the deal. This dude has a ton of war stories. We are just going to speed run the early life portion of this video. Our story begins on August 25th, 1919, when Matt Urban is born in Buffalo, New York. He is the youngest brother, and all of his brothers are track stars. One of his older brothers actually goes on to be an Olympic qualifier that competes against Jesse Owens. Other than being track stars, pretty normal childhood. Dad's a plumber, mom's a stay-at-home mom, grew up in the 1920s, 1930s. They all have the same childhood. We've heard this story 15 times. We're not going to rehash it. Fast forward, Matt Urban goes to
this is a long video, so I appreciate that he's speeding through it.
Team, and he's working 5 part-time jobs to pay for tuition. Apparently he wasn't busy enough, so he decides to go out for the boxing team as well, and due to his outstanding endurance from being a track star and as well as just being a natural athlete, he excels at boxing. He's able to box equally as good, conventional and southpaw, and he rapidly becomes known as the one-man boxing team because he competes for Cornell at 165 pounds, 175 pounds, and heavyweight. He's so good that to get him to compete at heavyweight, they had to stick lead weights inside of his trunks so that he would make weight.
Okay, that is interesting because, I mean, that is the thing with combat sports in general, is they don't want to be matching people who are two very different sizes together because that would just not be fair. So the fact that they actually had him fighting above his weight class artificially is actually really crazy because he was at a physical disadvantage. Although, interestingly, this is like one of a number of people that Fat Electrician has talked about in World War II who were just really, really good at boxing. Like, one of the ones I watched a couple of weeks ago was on Frank Luke, the Arizona Balloon Buster. And he, for a while, was making money fighting in underground boxing rings.
Despite that, he becomes a champion in all 3 weight classes. His junior year of college, it becomes pretty obvious that America at some point is going to be entering World War II, and he's going to get drafted, so he figures, hell, I'm just going to go ahead and join the ROTC program right now and start training, so that's exactly what he does. He then goes on to graduate college in 1941, immediately gets commissioned as an officer in the United States Army, becoming an infantry officer in the 9th Infantry Division, stationed at Fort Bragg. From here, pretty standard stuff. He's a platoon leader, training up his infantry guys, getting ready for the war that they know is coming, but Matt's a workaholic, so he also volunteers to be the regiment's morale officer, where he goes and starts a basketball team and a boxing team for the 9th Infantry Division. And from here, that's what he's doing for months. He's doing infantry training during the day, he's being a boxing coach at night, and this just keeps going on and on and on.
Well, yeah, I mean, if he's a good boxer, being a boxing coach makes sense.
In December of 1941, he finally gets a weekend pass. So obviously, he goes out to the bar on December 7th, 1941. As soon as he gets in there, he gets halfway through his beer, sitting on a bar stool at the bar, and the radio cuts in with an urgent announcement. The bar gets quiet, the bartender turns up the radio, and that's when Matt hears that America has been attacked by Japan at Pearl Harbor, crippling our Pacific fleet, killing thousands of Americans. All weekend passes.
Yeah, that's the thing, is history would have looked very different if Japan had not done that, if they just said, you know what, let's take over the entire Pacific except for America's stuff. Because that's the thing, historically speaking, don't touch our boats because we don't like that, and that tends to end badly for you.
Invoked, and all troops are ordered back to their outfits. From here, obviously, training ramps up as they get ready to go off to war. Fast forward almost a year of training later, it is October of 1942 when the 60th Infantry Division, including Matt Urban, get told, load up on the boat. And they're like, where are we going? And they're like, get your ass on the boat. So they load up on the USS Florence Nightingale and they set sail. Wherever they're going is apparently so secretive that they're not going to tell them until they get there. Now, on one hand, that's great for OPSEC, you know, operational security. You don't want to be telling the whole world where you're going to be going and launching a major attack in World War II. But on the other hand, it's pretty demoralizing for a military,
that is also true.
One that has a significant amount of people that were drafted and didn't volunteer to be there. The entire notion of get your ass on the boat, we're going to ship you off to war and we're not even going to tell you where, kind of a mentally draining type of a thing.
Yeah, and that is also a factor, is that in the modern day, we do have selective service. We haven't had a draft since Vietnam. The attitudes are going to be very different depending on if you have a volunteer army versus a conscripted army, because it's just different if people want to be there or not.
Because of this, understandably, morale on the USS Florence Nightingale, pretty low. Everybody's kind of in a bad mood. There's this rift happening between the officers and the enlisted. The enlisted guys are coming to resent the officers because we're all going off to war together and you guys aren't telling us what we're actually doing. Fuck you guys. So Matt Urban steps up. He's the morale officer, right? It's his job to keep morale high. He's got to give these guys something to focus on besides the fact that we're going off to war in places unknown. So he heads off to the supply room, grabs some rope and some duct tape. He ends up marking off a 20-foot by 20-foot section right there on the deck of the USS Florence.
Oh, they're doing a boxing ring?
Making a boxing ring. He
Damn. Okay, that's
goes
cool.
Up the stairs. He's standing on the deck in the
Honestly, I kind of like the idea that he says, you know what? People aren't happy. Let's just let them beat the shit out of each other.
Tower and just watches and waits, and sure enough, within 15 minutes a crowd has amassed and people are having boxing matches right there on the deck of the Florence Nightingale. Everybody's laughing.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually goes back to, like, this is a historically understood concept of, if you want to keep people from just, fucking with your shit, and you want to kind of keep power structures intact, you go to the old Roman bread and circuses idea, where if people are fed and they have entertainment, they are much less likely to cause problems, even when things are otherwise bad. They were on the army, so they were being fed. This is their entertainment. This is their circus.
They're gambling, they're having a good time. His plan worked great. This is a humongous boost to morale. Then things go a little bit sideways because the next natural progression happens. Everybody wants to know who's the best at boxing. So then it turns into, we're going to have boxing matches, and if you win, you stay inside the boxing ring. They're having
King of the Hill style boxing matches? That's
rotated
crazy.
in and out as they win or lose, and then eventually...
Because that's really insane, because one thing about boxing is that it is really, really physically draining. Like, there's a reason that boxing rounds for professional boxers are, I think it's, 3 minutes? That doesn't sound like a long time. But when you're doing 3 minutes of boxing, that's exhausting. So the fact that they're having you, okay, so you're boxing, you win, and then you immediately have to box somebody else. If you're not, like, really, really, really good, like, way better than the people you're fighting, you're probably going to lose that second round because you're already exhausted from the first fight.
This one guy comes in, one big dude named Al Shellbach. Apparently, he was a professional heavyweight boxer, and he proceeds to get in the ring, and nobody's able to get him out. He's knocking out absolutely everybody. At which point, it turns into everybody's going to pitch in money, and whoever can actually knock Al Shellbach out of the ring is going to get this huge pot of cash. People try.
That's cool.
Nobody can do it. He knocks out absolutely everybody, and it gets to the point that he's run out of people volunteering to get in that ring to box him, at which point, he starts yelling and boasting. He's pretty upset that he's on this ship, doesn't want to be going off to war, so he starts talking shit to the officers, yelling to the crowd that is amassed
okay,
around
so
him.
our protagonist here is probably going to go in. He is a former, even though he was not heavy enough to be a heavyweight, he still fought in the heavyweight division. So he is technically a heavyweight boxer himself. So that's where this is obviously going.
He wants to fight an officer now. At which point, Matt Urban is sitting up on this balcony like, ah, shit, this might have been a bad idea. At which point, Al Shellbach looks up at the balcony, makes direct eye contact with Matt Urban, and then proceeds to say, and I quote, "Hey you, punk lieutenant, yeah, in the peanut gallery, I dare you. Show us how gutless you officers are."
Okay, that's...
Yep, this is a mistake. Matt Urban has just backed himself into a corner because
That's
on one
great.
hand, this is the 1940s. Officers and enlisted are not supposed to be commingling or intermingling. He can't go down there as a officer and a gentleman and box an enlisted soldier.
Okay, but I will say, just, again, I'm not a person from the 1940s, so I don't know the attitudes, especially not military attitudes, because I'm not military. I've never been military. I have no intention of ever being military, because I know the way I think I would not do well, because I just don't like the idea of taking orders from idiots, which I'm told is 90% of what the military is, and I've been told that from military veterans. But I would imagine that having an officer willing to kind of come down, into the metaphorical mud with you and actually throw hands and show that they can actually scrap, I imagine that would be pretty good for respect, because historically that does seem, and it's not even actually just a military thing. If the people above you are shown to be willing to kind of exist in your space, that does end up resulting in your underlings, so to speak, having a lot of respect for you. Like, for example, Napoleon, very one of the most successful generals of his time. He basically was a threat to the entirety of Europe. One of the things he did was he commanded intense loyalty from his men, because he would actually like go down and load cannons himself, get all dirtied up, and they said, "Hey, the guy leading us is actually fighting alongside us. He is doing all the stuff he's telling us to do." And they were willing to fight and die for him, to like he had their backs and they had his. And I will also just give like kind of an example in a non-military sense. Years and years ago, I used to work at a supermarket. I've talked about how I used to run the back room, but before that, I was a cashier, and then I became customer service. And one of the things I noticed is I was doing customer service on a very busy day. And one of the things I had to do, because I was behind the service desk, I was also the person who would refill cash registers when they got low on like small bills, and I would take their cash when they got high on high bills, just to, you don't want to keep too much money in the cash register, and you want to always have change available. There was one time when I had to go to the safe and do something, even though I had a long line, and it's just, I did not have the option to not do it at that time, so I said, "I'm sorry, I need to do this right now. I will be right back to take care of you." And so I went to do it. I was going as fast as I can. And when I turned back around and went out of the room and saw my register, I saw that the one of the people from corporate, who was like right there, was willing to actually like she was on the register helping customers, taking a bit of the load off while I was busy doing the things I had to do. And everybody there who worked on the ground floor had so much respect for this woman, because that she showed that, hey, she may have been a corporate worker, but she was not putting herself above us. She was willing to actually get into the dirt and do the menial jobs that she was expecting us to do. So it's not just a military thing. So I think actually that this guy going down and actually fighting with the enlisted men would actually garner quite a lot of respect. Even if he loses, I think people would respect the fact that he's willing to scrap with them.
Because that would, be against their code of ethics and the standards and blah, 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 blah. But on the other hand, if he doesn't do it, just being a man, like, how are you going to lead these men into combat if you're not willing to go down there and show them that you also know how to fight?
That is true.
He's got this predicament, and he's like, fuck it, I'm gonna go down there. He starts walking down from the balcony. As he's coming down the stairs, he's taking his top off shirtless, and the crowd is going fucking nuts because Al Shellbach is about to knock out a lieutenant. What they don't know is that Matt Urban is also a heavyweight boxing champion, so they go in there and have this 3-round fight, and they beat the shit out of each other the entire time, but nobody gets knocked out, and it gets ruled a draw. At which point, Al Shellbach gives him a big hug, they raise each other's hands, tells him he's not like all the other officers. He is now a hero
that is a great,
all of the enlisted men.
Yeah, like I just said, he doesn't have to win. I think even if he lost, even if he got knocked out, I think the men would have respected the hell out of the fact that he was willing to get in the ring and actually put his money where his mouth is, so to speak.
And him and Al Shellbach just became homies forever.
Do you want to go do karate in the garage? Yup.
So this actually turned out pretty all right. Turned out pretty awesome. And then reality kicks in because the commanding officer yells down from the balcony that Urban needs to get his ass up here. Urban goes up there, then proceeds to get his ass chewed for boxing enlisted men, because that's not gentlemanly. He then proceeds to put both Urban and Shellbach on kitchen duty together for the rest of their trip. So they're peeling potatoes together, cooking food for the next couple of weeks, just hanging out pretty much all day. They become even better buddies. And then about 2-3 weeks in, early November, they have an officers meeting. Al Shellbach sneaks in with Urban, not a big deal. And they're sitting in this meeting and they basically break it down like, okay, we're off the coast of North Africa. This is Operation Torch. This is America's main invasion into North Africa. And the 9th Infantry Division is tasked with taking over Port Lyautey, which is being guarded by an old French fort known as Casaba. They need to make a landing on the beach and go take that fort to take over this port. And if that wasn't hard enough, that fort is occupied by the French Foreign Legion, and I know what you're thinking, isn't France on America's side?
No.
Kind of, sort of, not really at this point, because the French Foreign Legion has taken orders from Vichy France, which is occupied by the Germans.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Because I know France was in a weird position in World War II because they were kind of their own force, but not really, because they were partially occupied by Germany, partially a puppet state, kind of in this weird section where they definitely didn't like the Germans, but they also kind of had to take their orders. It was a weird time for them. So actually, it does make sense that the FFL would be their enemies in a sense.
Americans are going to be fighting the French, and the French Foreign Legion at this point, and really at all points, including modern time, it's kind of a legendary military unit.
Let's just start with the French Foreign Legion. They are tough,
Oh, that's a
hard, and they are
deadliest
willing
warrior.
to die rather than surrender.
And Matt Urban's platoon is slotted in the first wave to hit the beach. Matt Urban's heart jumps. He's absolutely pumped, and as soon as he gets that adrenaline hit, the commanding officer looks at Matt Urban and says, "But not you, because you're the morale officer. Remember, we're going to need you for after the battle to boost everybody's morale.
that's a good point.
You're keeping your ass right here on the ship, and so's your potato peeling buddy." At which point, Urban and Shellbach look at each other and telepathically communicate, "That's not fucking happening."
No, I understand that. You're being very serious right now.
I can clearly see you winking.
That night, Shellbach and Urban go. They get a life raft. They get their guns. They get ammo. They get grenades. They get everything they need to go off to battle. They get them in the life raft, throw it over the side of the ship, tie it off, get a rope ready to rappel down. They are going to go join this battle by themselves if they have to.
So I'm curious because, you know, he's not the first. Oh, that's going to be where the rowboat is. Okay. The foreshadowing is going to already pay off. But the thing that I'm always curious about, and I'm sure he'll go into it, a lot of the people he talks about in World War II, especially like the really crazy, impressive people, they do have a tendency to just kind of ignore the orders they don't like. And just because they're as good as they are, it tends to work out for them. I wonder what kind of consequences he's going to face for disobeying a direct order, because the army is understandably not exactly cool with people doing that. And it's one of those cases of, it's only not stupid because it worked. And a lot of times when these people do get punished, it's understandable. So I'm curious to see if he is going to get any kind of punishment, if it's going to affect his career at all.
The next morning, Operation Torch gets underway. They initiate the amphibious landing. The Higgins boats are making their way towards the beach, and right out of the gate, it is an enormous shit show. The enemy is somehow using artillery accurately, very accurately, too accurately for what is supposed to be happening. And the casualty reports just keep coming in, and they are
I'm not familiar with
horrific. At which
Operation
point,
Torch, so
Urban
I can't
and
say what's
Shellbach
going on.
Look at each other, they nod, they slip out, and they start lowering themselves down into this life raft. They get into this life raft, they start rowing their asses off. The commanding officer runs down to the deck and is screaming at Matt Urban, "Where the fuck are you going? Get your ass back here." And Matt Urban's just like, "Nope," and they just keep rowing right into the gunfire and artillery fire and explosions headed towards the beach.
Actually, and come to think of it, because he's actually in a life raft and not one of the regular amphibious landing vehicles, he presents a smaller target. So they're probably not even going to... the fact that they're shooting very accurately is actually probably good for him, because they're not going to be aiming at this tiny life raft. They're going to be aiming at the bigger ships or the bigger boats that are dropping people off. So the fact that they're accurate is there's not any strong likelihood that they're going to catch any strays. That's kind of cool.
The closer they get to the beach, the more horrific a sight they see. There's just more and more dead bodies floating in the water. There's guys that drowned because the Higgins boats opened their doors too soon and they went in with full kit and didn't make it. There's guys that have been shot, blown up. It's horrific. They managed to rescue a couple of guys that were stranded out in the water, and while this is happening, unbeknownst to them, the Americans had figured out why the artillery fire was so accurate, and it's because the Vichy French had a bunch of guys up inside of a lighthouse overlooking the beach, and were using that as a vantage point to call in accurate artillery fire. Fortunately for Matt Urban, and unfortunately for everybody in that lighthouse, once the Americans figured out that that's where the forward observers are, they radioed over to the most gangster battleship of all time, the USS Texas, which was also right there, and told them to delete that fucking lighthouse Which they did. Okay, that's life. 1 second you're French, you're fancy, you're in a lighthouse, you're eating a baguette with your homies, it's romantic, you're calling in artillery fire on the invading American swine, and then the USS Texas just starts lobbing 1,500-pound freedom suppositories at your structure, and then you wake up dead.
I mean, that's one of those things where it kind of makes sense once you figure that out, that is going to be a target, and, you know, lighthouses don't exactly move. So you knock it down, it's done.
You wake up dead. Because you're alive when you go to sleep.
Matt finally makes it to the beach. All the men have already advanced like 100 yards further. He's running, trying to catch up to him. He's dodging gunfire. There's bullets whizzing past him. He gets about halfway there and he sees that there's some private laying down inside of a crater, huddled up, not knowing what the fuck to do. He dives into this crater. This kid's freaked out, doesn't know what the fuck to do. He's having a panic attack. It's Private First Class Grabski. It's a kid from his platoon. He grabs him, get the fuck up and let's go. And they continue to advance towards the objective. He almost
that's another factor is when people go into combat for the first time, a lot of people suddenly realize that shit's gotten real and they freak out.
Where the men are pinned down in front of him, and then a humongous artillery explosion happens right in front of him where those men were. He dives to the ground with the private, and rolling up next to him comes a human head.
Oof.
Worse than that, it's an American human head, and it's a human head of somebody that he recognizes, Lieutenant Goodwin, one of the other lieutenants from one of the other platoons in the 60th Infantry.
Yeah, that's another factor. It's not only are they, like, you know, thrown into a war scenario and freaking out because of that, when you see people you know start to die, you know, PTSD is a real thing. There's a reason that a lot of soldiers come back fucked up.
Moment, Matt Urban gets extremely upset, and that rapidly turns into anger and adrenaline, at which point he stands to his feet with zero regard for himself and rushes towards the enemy bunker that is pinning down the men in front of him. He hurdles over his men hiding for cover straight towards this bunker, and before they can shoot him down, he throws a grenade into this pillbox, blows it up, and then clears it with his rifle. And as the men behind him start to stand up, realizing, oh shit, we're rushing the position, he immediately advances to the next pillbox and clears it as well, completely by himself.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that with a pillbox, they're pretty good for the most part, but once you get a grenade in there, they're kind of fucked because, you know, the whole thing is it's hard to get anything in there. You know, you only have little openings to try to get yourself to be able to shoot outwards, but, you know, get something that goes boom inside there, it's then hard to get it out.
The rest of the men jump into action, and the American forces manage to clear out all of the pillboxes and trenches surrounding this French Fort Casaba. Now the Americans basically have this fort surrounded. There's no way that they can break in. They don't have tanks. They don't have any heavy artillery yet. All they have is small arms and grenades, and this French fort has these massive doors, humongous thick stone walls. They have no way to break in there to fight them. And from here, it turns into like a pitched siege warfare for the next 3 days. The French will open the doors, try to launch a counterattack. The Americans mow them down.
Yeah, that's interesting. You don't really see like traditional sieges in modern warfare all that often. I mean, it is going to be a thing that can happen, especially if there's a really fortified position that they're trying to overtake. But like, that was a thing more back in the day. So like, it's kind of interesting that even as, you know, recently as World War II, there have actually been like full-on sieges.
Just kind of stuck there waiting for one side to give up. And in between these counterattacks, there's just these huge lulls. And by the end of the first day, Matt Urban remembers sitting down inside of a trench, watching the sunset, thinking to himself, this place is beautiful. This is not somewhere where you're supposed to be fighting a war. Next day, same thing, pitched battle. There's counterattacks here and there, but between there's just hours of these huge lulls where everybody's kind of sitting around, eating food, doing nothing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's how sieges tend to go. Again, historical sieges would last months where, you know, the whole idea was that you're not going to necessarily be able to break in. Although if you could, that was definitely a good way to end things. And the other people inside weren't necessarily going to be able to force you away. But it's just kind of, you're trying to starve out the people inside and try to force them to essentially break the siege and have a pitched battle and fight in a way that does not give them the advantages that their position offers them. So there would be, as much as they say, oh, yeah, there's a siege that lasted months, it's not like it was months of fighting. It was months of occasional skirmishes and a lot of waiting around.
Eventually, the French launch a massive counterattack as the doors to the fortress open and 3 French tanks roll out and immediately get blown up with bazookas. They immediately shut the doors again, and now everybody's just kind of sitting there in a lull. By the 3rd day, they're having logistical issues. They're not getting enough food and water to the front to feed the men. Everybody's getting hungry. They're getting thirsty. They want to end this shit, and they want to end it now. And there's not really a great tactful way to go about that.
Yeah,
so
and that's how it happens. One side ends up getting fed up and said, you know what? This ends now.
Rely on good old-fashioned brute force and ignorance to get it done.
It's good old-fashioned blunt force trauma. Yeah, let's start building some hurting bombs.
They grab all the bazookas and bazooka shells that they have. They send a group around to the rear gate. They're at the front gate, and they coordinate a time, and they just start shooting fucking bazookas at the gates until they break them off their fucking hinges.
That's amazing.
And swarm the entire fort.
I mean, it's one of those things that it's the kind of solution you come up with when you're, you know, drunk and talking about things. How would you break into that? You know, just fucking shoot bazookas at it. It's only stupid if it doesn't work.
Matt Urban and the 9th Infantry Division's next battle takes place in Tunisia, where Erwin Rommel, the legendary German tank commander, and his famed Panzer Division, supposedly the best, most experienced military unit on the planet at this point in time, are charging towards Allied forces. The best place to do that is going to be in a 2-mile gap in the Atlas mountain chain known as the Kasserine Pass.
That's a really, that's a very flat area. Not super flat area, but like it's pretty flat and there's not a lot of cover. So yeah, that would be a pretty good place where tanks could really shine.
In this 2-mile gap, in this narrow choke point, they might be able to stop him. The problem is the 9th Infantry Division is over 700 miles away, and Erwin Rommel is beelining it straight towards them. So in a hurry, they pack their shit up, 411 vehicles and artillery pieces, and 2,000 men travel 777 miles in 3 days. Buh! 777 miles isn't that far to travel in 3 days. Buh! Yeah, if we're talking about you hopping on the interstate in your car, sure, but this isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about being in the desert of North Africa. There's no gas stations. They got to bring all their own food, all their own water.
Yeah, supply chains are another major warfare thing.
With 400 vehicles, 777 miles through the desert of North Africa in 3 days. Okay, yes, it's impressive. They are traveling all day and all night for 3 days straight, and they make it to Kasserine Pass before Rommel and his division. Matt Urban and the 60th Infantry Regiment are held up at a smaller...
So then there's also the question of this nobody ever... And I'm not like criticizing Fat Electrician specifically because this happens all over YouTube. They never really go into like what was the effect of the sleep deprivation, because sleep deprivation really just destroys your brain. I think that like 20 hours without sleep, something like that, is comparable to being legally drunk as far as the effects on your cognitive ability. So legally intoxicated as in the 0.08 alcohol BAC. So like as impressive as it is that they went and pushed for 3 days to get to the position first, they're not going to be in 100% fighting form because they're going to have not gotten enough sleep. They're just not going to be functioning the same as normal, even with the adrenaline of combat.
Within the Kasserine Pass, known as McNassie Pass, and it is just wide enough for a single tank to get through. Literally one road with cliffs on either side. They get their 155mm howitzers leveled in a crossfire right at the pass, and as soon as a German Panzer tank comes rolling through, they blow that thing up. They blow the tank up right behind it, completely blocking the pass. Now nothing can get through. Then there's kind of a lull in the battle. Matt Urban's up at a vantage point with binoculars trying to see what's going on, and after a couple of hours, he sees what appears to be a sandstorm approaching his direction from where the Nazis are.
Yeah, that could cause problems
closer,
as well.
He realizes that's not a sandstorm.
Oh, those are the tanks?
The Nazis are bringing in their heavy artillery,
okay.
240mm cannons. At which point, Urban's artillery guy informs him, those guns have like twice the range of anything we've got. They're going to be able to hit us way before we're going to be able to hit them. Now some of the men are kind of shitting themselves because this is, for all intents and purposes, the first big clash between the Nazis and the American forces. And it's Erwin Rommel's famous Panzer Division. The Germans have better machine guns that don't jam. Their grenades
are more at this point in the war, early on, the Germans did actually have some pretty significant advantages that the Allies just weren't fully prepared for. So that is pretty much an exemplar of what the Germans had going for them at the time.
Their tanks are better, their artillery's better. It's not looking good. Despite that, Matt Urban tells his guys to calm down. dig in, we're fighting them right here. And within the hour, they start getting hit by German heavy artillery. They weather the storm. The Germans launch an attack. They repel the attack. They start hammering them with artillery again. The Germans launch another attack. They repel the attack. And this goes on for the next 72 hours straight. Oof. Matt Urban said that there wasn't a single second over the course of the next 3 days where there wasn't a shell inbound, and he was legitimately concerned that he or one of his men was going to suffocate from all of the dust that was being kicked up. They couldn't see shit. Despite that, they held the pass for 72 hours straight, and then it just stopped. Eerie silence and just the ringing of the tinnitus that they all now have. Matt Urban climbs up to a vantage point with his binoculars and sees the Germans are retreating. Rommel has exhausted his ammunition and supplies and is forced to retreat.
Well, also that is also noteworthy. As much as the Germans did have the heavy artillery power, the firepower, which is not an insignificant advantage, especially with the Panzer Division, which it was a pretty significant force at the time. The ammo is going to be thousands and thousands of pounds of ammo. That's got to come from somewhere. It's got to be moved. It's not going to be the easiest thing. Like, once you run out, it's going to take some time to resupply.
Straight days, the boys were hungry, they're tired, so Matt picks out a couple of people to set up guard and watch, and everybody else is just supposed to grab some food, eat, and take a nap. Matt Urban gets that going. He finally goes, gets some food for himself, sits down, starts opening up a can of sea rations, when one of the guards comes running up that there's a raiding party headed their direction from behind them.
Son of a bitch.
Okay, now he's pissed. At this point, the Germans are just trying to starve him to death before they can actually shoot him. He grabs a rifle platoon, heads off to investigate. He gets over to where the supposed German raiding party is, and what he finds is a bunch of dudes in robes with Aladdin swords and like old World War I rifles looting one of his supply drops. His rifle platoon immediately opens fire, shooting some of them. The rest scatter off into the tall grass. They all disappear. Matt orders his men not to pursue them. They're clearly not a legitimate threat. It's turning into a long day. He's got the Germans trying to kill him over here. The Tuscan Raiders are behind him trying to steal all of his shit. He just wants to eat his food. He goes back, he eats some food. A couple hours later, he gets woken up by a guard again. Sir, there's a civilian approaching from behind us. And that's like, oh, okay.
That's interesting.
Fine. He goes out, he meets with the civilian. It's somebody that can kind of speak broken English. Basically, the village that the people that just raided his supply depot are from, some of them got shot and they want medical aid. Okay, and just like so we're all on the same page, in World War II, this is not a normal thing. This is not like Iraq, Afghanistan, where we're an occupying force. We're trying to win over hearts and mind and go hand out.
Yeah, no, this is a conventional warfare, because back in the modern things that the U.S. military is doing, it's not really technically on paper it's not war, even though it for all intents and purposes is. But it's not like government against government. It's government against like loosely organized like groups of people, which are it's really hard to fight conventionally against those. So they do need to kind of get the populace on your side, ideally, if you want to be effective. Yeah, in conventional warfare, you just see the other army, beat the other army, and you win.
Candy and medical aid and all kinds of shit. Like, this is not a standard thing to have happen. Which is why none of Matt Urban's guys want to do this, because they think it's a trap, because obviously. Despite that, Matt Urban decides they're going to go do it. So he grabs some medics, grabs a rifle platoon, they head off to this village, and they patch up everybody that they can that got shot. Get that done, head back to the pass where their base is, and they're there for about an hour, and then the guard comes running up again. Sir, there's another civilian approaching. They go out there, and it is just this one singular Jeep hauling ass straight towards them.
That could end up getting them shot very easily.
Guns, tells him to hide in the tall grass, be ready for anything. He's got 2 guards with him. He's standing in the middle of the road as this Jeep comes screaming up. As it approaches, he sees what appears to be like a sultan, like a king. The dude's got all the fancy robes on. He's got this big ass gold chain with a massive gold pendant, and the Jeep rolls up and stops, and in broken English asks who's in charge. At this point, Matt's thinking, okay, this is somebody important. This is like the king or something, and I've just committed an international incident. So he's like, I don't know. I'm in charge, sir.
I'm confused.
Urban.
I don't know.
The Sultan dude then gets this big, enormous smile showing off his gold teeth and says, and I quote, "Thank you. You killed a bad man. Thieves no good." The Jeep then does a big U-turn and drives off the other direction where they came from. All of his guys come out of the tall grass, laughing and joking, imitating the Sultan.
That's amazing. It's like he just Guy pops up and is like, good shit, bro, and just fucks off. Amazing.
And Matt Urban's just standing there like, what the fuck is happening right now? This is the weirdest day ever. I'm going to bed. Matt Urban and the rest of the 9th Infantry Division are headed further into Tunisia, and while they're making their way there, they come across a clan of Gomieres. Now, Gomieres, from what I understand, is Arabic for the phrase irregular soldier. Basically, they're badass guerrilla fighters that are very reminiscent of Gurkhas. They're known for carrying big-ass scary blades.
And the Gurkhas are no fucking
having
joke.
the same exact legend that Gurkhas have, that if they draw their blade, they have to draw blood, so if there's no enemy to kill, they'll cut their finger because it's just like part of the superstition. Every time you draw your weapon, it has to draw blood. They're Moroccans that are working for the French and usually only carry blades into combat. And the Germans are kind of terrified of them because they're renowned for sneaking into German camps at night, slitting a bunch of people's throats, and overall just committing a bunch of heinous war crimes.
So desert ninjas, basically.
Stark, raving, mad, crazy, nuts. They had no guns, but boy, they had the knives. And when they first went in, they paid them by the ear. 2 cents an ear.
But hey, they're on our side, so Matt Urban wants to go say hi. He figures they've been operating in this area, maybe they know something that he doesn't. So he goes up to him, finds one that kind of speaks broken English, and just kind of asks him like, Germans? And the guy just like frantically nods his head yes, and he goes, where? How many? And the guy just says, come.
Hey, Jim.
Not now, Toby. My God.
Get the hell out of here, idiot.
And he takes off, so Matt Urban follows him by himself. And Matt Urban is struggling to keep up, which is impressive because Matt Urban is a track star, and this Gumier is just sprinting through this rugged mountainous terrain.
Yeah, I mean, if you live in this kind of particular area, you end up learning the muscle memory for how to handle it, because it's not just the fact that he's, you know, in good physical shape, is that he's just used to running in this terrain and doesn't have to kind of mentally adjust to it like Matt Urban probably does.
Single sound. And this goes on for miles, and then finally the Gumier just stops, and Matt Urban's like, catches up to the guy, and he's like, what's going on? And the guy just points, and off in the distance, there's a 8x12 cement building out in the middle of the desert. And Matt Urban is like, what the fuck is that? And turns around to talk to the Gumier, and the guy's just gone.
Oh, hi, Mark.
So Matt Urban turns his attention back to the cement building out in the middle of nowhere, and he just like kind of watches it for a little while, and then he sees that there's German patrols guarding it, so obviously it's something important. He better go investigate. So he starts low crawling, moving as little as possible, excruciatingly slow, covering ground. And as he gets closer and closer, he starts seeing all kinds of wires running into this cement building. And that's when he realizes,
I have no idea what this
is
could
Rommel's
be.
entire division's communications.
Oh,
he keeps
okay.
working his way closer and closer to the building.
Yeah, that's
and then
huge.
eventually, the sun's starting to go down, and the Germans that are on patrol all sit down and start eating their dinner. This is his chance. He sneaks up to the cement enclosure, pulls a pin on his grenade, opens the door, throws it inside, shuts the door.
One thing I never really understood is this is not like the only story like this I've heard. Why do these people guarding this really important thing not have like staggered meal times? Because mealtime just seems like a pretty obvious time to attack because you're all kind of preoccupied with food.
Grenade explodes, pops back inside the door, shoots both the radio operators with his Colt 45, then throws another grenade right at the radio equipment and takes off fucking running. The Germans start chasing him, they're shooting at him. One of them throws one of their big ass stick grenades near enough to him to knock him off of his feet, takes shrapnel in his right hand, hops back up and keeps sprinting, says it's the fastest he's ever run in his entire life. Makes it to within 100 yards of his own lines, and then his own guys start shooting at him with machine guns. He runs and dives into a depression and like has a white handkerchief and is like waving it over the top, and one of the guys that's shooting at him is like, who goes there? And he's like, it's Urban, stop fucking shooting at me. So he makes it back to his lines, reports to his captain, explains to the captain what happened, and the captain is like,
it's gonna be one, if he ever deals with those soldiers again, they're never going to be able to raise a fucking word to him, because every time he'll just say, yeah, remember that time you fucking shot at me, you dickheads?
I don't know whether to court-martial you or give you a medal. The war is hard enough without you showing off constantly. You're fucking taking rowboats into amphibious landings. You're running off with Moroccan assassins to take out Rommel's communication centers by yourself. We're not going to talk about this. Go to the med tent, get your hand fixed.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Urban and his guys continue further into Tunisia, heading north, and the terrain kind of shifts. It goes from, being a desert to being this like arid middle ground, and then it turns into this dense, arid forest type shit. It's just thick, dry brush everywhere. And in this new terrain, they come up to a mountain.
thick, dry brush everywhere. I'm wondering if fire is going to be a factor in this upcoming part of the story.
With a German stronghold on top that apparently has been fighting back the British for months. It's a steep terrain, there's brush everywhere, they've got machine gun emplacements up top inside of these stone bunkers, it's impenetrable.
I've heard that before.
But hey, somebody's got to go up there and take it out, and the chain of command at the 9th Infantry Division is like, I've got just the guy. Matt Urban, you want to show off? Go get him. Matt Urban grabs his platoon and he decides that he's going to attack where the enemy's going to expect it the least. He's going to shuttle his men single file up the steepest part of this mountain. Matt Urban leads his
That's
platoon
not
through all
fun.
of this thick brush, single file.
Let's also not forget that they're carrying heavy shit with them. They're carrying their guns, they're carrying their rucksacks, all that stuff. Like, it's not just them climbing up, it's them lugging a bunch of shit up with them. That's got to be exhausting.
Gets everybody as close as possible before the jungle starts to clear out, and once they get as close as that point, they have this stopping point. They downgrade all their equipment, they get rid of their canteens, they drop their packs, they fix bayonets on their rifles, and they start grabbing dirt, smearing it on their face. They're about to have a raiding party. They start creeping up closer and closer on the German position, and when they get within eyesight, Matt Urban realizes they have no idea that they're coming. The Germans are all just sitting around goofing off. Perfect. They continue to
80 pounds at least.
Right up
Thanks for the confirmation, ANCAP. Like, I knew it was a lot. I didn't know exactly how much, because, and of course, I don't know if it's different nowadays versus World War II times, but yeah, I know carrying shit is not, again, whenever they say, though, the soldiers did this thing, it's always they did this thing and carried a bunch of shit with them. Come on.
Stone wall surrounding this little encampment of Germans in their fortified position, and Matt Urban pulls out his Colt 45 in one hand and a flare gun in the other.
Time to make the chimmy fucking chongas.
Matt Urban pops up, shoots a flare directly into the machine gun emplacement that would open fire on his men, then
fucking visibility, okay.
Flare into that machine gun emplacement, hops the wall with all of his men, and they charge. The Germans are caught completely off guard and have to retreat from their position.
Oops.
They run, they occupy the bunkers with the machine guns, they turn the guns around and open fire on the fleeing Germans as they see off in the distance that the Germans have some captured Allied POWs that they begin executing. They then proceed to go capture those Germans and line them up to return the favor. The Nazi officer is then screaming, "You can't do this, it's against the Geneva Treaty," at which point he's basically told, "So was what you just did. I don't give a shit."
Yeah, it's one of the things. I'm not usually, and this is going to be a fucking wild sentence to say, I'm not usually on board with war crimes, but I do kind of understand a proportional response to a war crime being a comparable war crime. It depends on what is actually, like, happening, but, like, I kind of get it. It's like, when shit hits the fan, you know, it does kind of become the Geneva suggestions.
Line the Germans up, point guns at him, and his men are just waiting for Matt to give the order. They want him to do it. Like, dude, give me the order. This is bullshit. They just killed a bunch of our guys. Let's return the favor. And Matt...
But also, I do kind of think that just killing prisoners in response to killing prisoners, probably not a good thing. Because, you know, it's not exactly the prisoner's fault about what happened. So, like, I understand the attitude, but also, like, don't do that. He
can't do it. They finish taking the position and escort the German prisoners back to headquarters. After this, they continue to advance further into Tunisia, and what's going on at this point during the campaign is the Allied forces have basically taken over the entire country, but the Germans are still held out on top of like hills and mountains in these super strong fortified positions, and the Allied forces have just kind of gone around them for now. They've taken over the whole country, and now it's time to double back and clear them out. And Matt Urban's battalion has been tasked with going and taking out a fortified German position known as Hill 409. So Matt Urban's unit, the 2nd Battalion...
Yeah, I will say, one thing I will just acknowledge is I have a general idea of how World War II went down. Just as I mentioned that a lot of the stuff in the Pacific Theater, especially like the Southeast Asian areas of somewhere, is an area I'm kind of deficient in my World War II knowledge, which I mentioned during the video I watched like, 2-3 weeks ago. I'm also very deficient in the North African campaign. I don't really know how that went down. So I don't have a ridiculous amount of commentary to add, but I'm also learning a ton.
Infantry Regiment of the 9th Infantry Division makes their way to Hill 409. Once they get fairly close, Matt Urban orders the rest of his men to rest. He grabs a couple of his best guys and he goes up on a scouting mission to assess the situation. They get up there close enough and Matt Urban realizes that there's an entire German regiment on top of Hill 409, which is about 2 to 3 times bigger than a battalion.
I like those odds.
Just so we're all on the same page and we know what that means, they are outnumbered at least 2 to 1. They'll be fighting uphill into fortified machine gun positions.
Oh,
not looking that
yeah,
great.
no, those, because that's one thing is I know, there's kind of the Star Wars meme of, "Oh, give up, Anakin, I have the high ground." But like in warfare, the high ground fucking matters because it's really good, and also being outnumbered at the same time. And machine gun positions, their whole thing is they are basically a "hey, don't get fucking near us" button. So this shouldn't work.
Also, Matt Urban's the main character and he's got plot armor, so we're gonna fucking run it. But he's gonna need a pretty good plan, so he stays there just watching what the Germans are up to, and he notices right around lunchtime at noon, all of the Germans leave their fortified machine gun positions, eat lunch, and then after lunch, a new group of Germans switch out and they go occupy the machine gun positions. That's the plan. They're going to rush those fortified machine gun positions right when they are unoccupied by the Germans, then they're gonna spin them around and use their own fortifications against them and take the hill. And the very next day, that's exactly what happens. They mow down some of the Germans with their own machine guns, but the vast majority of them retreat and escape. And that's it. Main character, good plan, makes for an easy day for a minute, because about 15 minutes later, the Germans launched a massive counterattack, and now the entire battalion is in this German fortified position, and they are now surrounded by a force 2 to 3 times larger than...
I might be missing something, but they might actually have the advantageous position now, even if they're still outnumbered, even if they're surrounded. I don't know. Because they took over. He said, unless I completely misheard, which is definitely possible. It's, I woke up a couple hours ago. Like I genuinely woke up like 20 minutes before the stream started. So, but yeah, if they took over the position, they're probably in a good position, even if everything else is not good for them.
Them, and they're fucking stuck with no way to get more supplies. They managed to repel the first German counterattack, but like I said, they're still stuck. So they just kind of hang out there and they repel another counterattack. And then night comes and they repel another counterattack. And then the second day, they repel multiple more German counterattacks.
Well, that's also a factor, is if the Germans are not trying to like starve them out, which it sounds like they're trying to actually take them over and not just use their positioning, the surrounding to really just starve them out or wear them down. They're continually attacking. That could actually put the Americans in a good position to where just make themselves too costly to take. And that's how you win.
They're running out of food, water, and ammunition. By the end of the second day, things are not looking good. They are going to run out of ammo and all their other supplies. They're going to get overrun. Luckily, on the morning of the third day, they managed to get a bunch of supplies airdropped in right on top of the hill.
Okay. Yeah, and that it's one thing is, let's not forget that World War II is like the first time we've seen large-scale warfare where airplanes have kind of been figured out. World War I was the first major use of airplanes. World War II is when we kind of got that shit on lock. Like, we know how they work. We know what we can do with them. Just imagining the game-changing effect that being able to airdrop supplies has been on warfare. Because before, you needed a physical supply line, and even now, like, supply lines are like the most efficient way to actually fill, keep yourself supplied. But if you can't do that, actually being able to bypass enemy lines and just drop the shit you need on top of people, that is a game changer.
That manages to keep them in the fight. They fight the entire third day. On the morning of the fourth day, Matt Urban is woken up right at dawn as the sun is starting to illuminate the battlefield to all of his men running past him, retreating. Matt Urban jumps to his feet like, what the fuck is going on? Starts yelling at his dudes to hold
he's
their
probably not
position,
happy
and
about
then
that,
off in the distance,
given what we
he
learned
hears
about
in
him.
perfect English, somebody yelling for retreat, so he takes off that direction. It's early morning, it's barely light out, it's super foggy up on this hill, he can barely see 6 feet in front of him. And he's just following the sound of this voice in perfect English yelling, retreat, we're being overrun. As he closes in on this voice calling for retreat, somehow in the fog, he had circled around behind this guy, and as he gets closer, he sees that it's a German uniform yelling in perfect English.
Okay, that is actually really fucking clever. Like, having a fluent or sounds like a native English speaker or someone who's at least fluent enough to be able to fake it, calling out a false command while the visibility is fucked. That is really clever, actually.
Tricking the Americans.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
I haven't seen the Mario movie.
Matt Urban runs up behind this guy.
I've heard
pulls
it's
out
actually
his
pretty
trench
good.
Knife, stabs him in the neck to shut him up immediately, and thinking fast, I don't know if it was
Fucking
luck
Wilhelm
or if he
scream.
actually did this on purpose, but he grabs the German's burp gun and shoots the two guys that were with him. And the reason that this is genius is because it totally saves him and his men, because by using the German gun, which sounds significantly different than the American Thompson,
Oh, that's a
Germans
good
know
point.
that, the Americans know that, it gives all of the Americans warning of like, hey, here's where the Germans are, they're coming from this direction. In addition to that, all the German forces behind him now think that he's German, so they're not going to open fire on him.
That's actually interesting, because yeah, I wonder if that was intentional or not. Was it just a case of, hey, that's the gun that I happen to have in front of me, so I'm going to use it? Or was he actually thinking that far ahead? I mean, I guess we'll never know, but that's interesting.
Which really comes in handy as an entire German rifle squad comes running through the fog towards him, thinking that their buddy needs backup, and he turns the burp gun back around and lights them up too. Matt then runs back to his guys through the fog, gets everybody back into their fighting positions as they repel the Germans' last all-out counterattack, where they threw everything they had at the Americans. But because of Matt Urban's actions, they managed to hold out, and after that one single counterattack, they counted 116 dead Nazis on the hill. And that was it. The Germans continued retreating. They were gone. The hill is secured. For this battle, Matt Urban's battalion would receive a distinguished unit citation, which is a huge deal. And shortly after that, the Tunisia campaign would come to an end, with Axis forces surrendering in the area on May 13th, 1943.
It's cool to... One thing I do also like about World War II is we actually do have, not like a lot, well, it is a lot, but like, we do actually have footage of a lot of the things that we're discussing. So I like how Fat Electrician's editor can actually like show us what's like happening, like, and we can actually see it. Like, you know, it's not like modern day where a lot of the war is going to be filmed, and you can see, you know, footage of niche skirmishes that don't even make a difference at the end of the day. But it does add a lot to the story to be able to actually see what's happening.
From here, Matt Urban and his guys get some R&R, then they're told to board a boat to places unknown yet again. They make their way there. They end up off the coast of Sicily, off the city of Palermo. While there, his ship gets attacked by German Stuka dive bombers, and the first pass ends up killing a guy on the anti-aircraft gun that is closest to Matt Urban. Matt Urban runs over, mans the anti-aircraft gun, and shoots down the next Stuka dive bomber that tries to make a pass at him. And then the attack's over.
So I'm thinking, because this was back when anti-aircraft guns were not as good as they are at the end of the war, because I know that one of like the big game changers in the Pacific theater towards the end was being able to develop ammunition, explosive ammunition, that could actually explode near enemy aircraft, not just when on impact. So that just kind of effectively increased their accuracy by making it so you don't have to score a direct hit on an enemy aircraft to shoot it down. So this was before that was a thing. So being able to just shoot down an aircraft like that, even if they're diving right on you, and it's, you know, not the most difficult target, it's still a pretty impressive thing compared to nowadays and compared to the end of World War II.
Goes about his business, just complete main character energy like it was no big deal.
What a day, what a day.
The next morning, they depart the ship, and they are essentially told, the enemy's that way. Go get them until you hit the ocean and we've taken over the entire island. No tanks, no vehicles, no nothing. Just walk your happy ass from one end of the island to the other and kill all the bad guys that you find.
And I will say, as you know, one thing about me is, granted, this is not a military scenario, but my favorite way of having jobs to do is just saying, here is what we want you to get done. Go get it done. That's kind of how my job is most of the time, where it's just kind of, I know where to look to find what I need to do, and I just have to go and do it until it's time to clock out. So, as much as it's probably not the best idea in warfare, I feel like I can kind of appreciate this style of order.
So they take off road marching. Matt Urban is at the front of his battalion with all of his men walking behind him on the road. Obviously, they're doing most of their road marching like early in the morning and kind of later in the day to avoid the heat, and that's when it gets kind of cold. So at some point, Matt Urban takes to having a wool blanket. He throws that over his helmet, over his shoulders like a cloak, and he's just leading his troops into battle. And the men start to joke that the entire 9th Infantry Division is being led by a ghost. And this is where the nickname Matt Urban, the Ghost, first originates.
Okay, so that's interesting. Because Fat Electrician implied earlier on that he was called the Ghost because of how often he got shot and just didn't die, and how close he came to dying. But it seems like it was because of the cloak that he was called the Ghost. Because also the other way you would be called the Ghost is if you were like a stealth specialist, which it doesn't seem like that's what he is.
Urban and the 9th Infantry Division have fought the French, they fought the Germans, and now they're fighting the Italians. Or at least they're trying to, because the Italians at this point in the war, they're not very well trained, they're not very well equipped, and they do not have very high morale.
That's one of the things, is that the Italians were kind of the weak link of the Axis powers during the early parts of World War II. It got to a point where, Japan and Germany were both actually pretty successful early on, because they were both using kind of hit 'em fast, hit 'em hard tactics. And they had just, they were just doing things that the Allies didn't have responses to. But the Italians, their kind of main thing is they took Ethiopia, where, they rolled their tanks and guns into a combat zone defended by, like, literally spears and bows and arrows and shit. So it was like, they didn't even have to try to win that. But every time they tried to do things, they would get pushed back. Whenever they would get attacked, they would kind of lose. I think that at one point Churchill called Italy Europe's soft underbelly. So they were really like, that alliance actually probably hurt the Axis powers more than they thought it would.
So as soon as they see the Americans coming, every time they approach a village that has enemy soldiers in it, by the time they actually reach the village, the enemy soldiers have already packed their shit up and retreated. And this happens pretty much the entire time they're in Sicily. They walk from sea to shining sea.
And also, Sicily is a very tactically useful island. Being able to take control of that is pretty big.
Almost no combat. After that, they're told to board a boat. They get shipped off to England to prepare for D-Day. Once they get over to England, there's a lot of R&R going on, there's a lot of training going on, but Matt Urban in particular resumes his role as the morale officer and is told to organize a massive morale boxing event for the entire 7th Corps of the Army. They want it to be a big deal. They've got Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, the world heavyweight boxing champion, coming through. He's going to be willing to box some of the soldiers. It's just supposed to be a big morale event. So he resumes his role as a boxing trainer. He's getting some dudes trained up, and then at night, he's going out on the town having a good time. One night, he goes out to a circus and he meets an attractive woman that he describes as a shapely brunette. Her name is Marie Brown, and he would later find out that she had won Miss England a couple years prior. They drink and hang out all night, and as the night comes to an end, Matt Urban decides to be a gentleman and make sure that she gets home okay, which he agreed to before he realizes that it was a 20-mile train ride to a different town, but he goes anyways.
That is something that probably should have been disclosed ahead of time.
So all the way home to the front doorstep, gives her a kiss, and then turns around to leave, at which point Miss England tells him, that was the last train for the night, there's not going to be another one till the morning. You're going to have to stay here. Darn it. At this point...
He's like, oh, you've twisted my arm.
His hopes aren't very high. He's thinking he's going to be sleeping on the couch, which is fine. No big deal. She walks him upstairs to the guest bedroom, which is extremely nice in this very nice house. And he takes a bath, goes, lays down, and it's like the peak of luxury. Dude's been sleeping out in the fields in Africa and in Sicily. He just got to have a bath, and now he's sleeping in an actual bed. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I will say, just sleeping after in an actual bed, just a couple of days of having not great sleeping arrangements, that alone feels like absolutely heavenly. Because like I remember last time I got like significantly sick for, I don't know what it was, but like just something happened and I just felt like absolute shit, coughing like crazy, it was just a very bad time, and it was about 2 weeks of being significantly sick, and I got tested for COVID, tested for the flu, nothing anybody could identify. But one of the things that happened was because of how much I was coughing, I had to sleep in weird ways. The only consistent way I could find to sleep was to sleep mostly upright on the couch. the first night I was actually able to sleep in my bed, that like the coughing had gotten better enough that I could actually do that. Words cannot describe how good that felt.
Right as he's about to go asleep, Miss England comes and gets in bed with him. In Matt Urban's own words, and I quote, "I was a perfect gentleman, and each person will have to interpret that for themselves."
Beautiful.
All right, fine.
Amazing wordplay. Like not wordplay, but like I, as somebody who appreciates quality writing, appreciate that phrasing.
Interpret it. The next morning, Matt Urban wakes up to a knock on the door. He scrambles, starts getting his clothes on, like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. It's an angry husband. It's an angry father with a shotgun. Whatever's on the other side of that door is not good. He runs over to the window, fully prepared to jump out of a second-story building. Another gorgeous woman walks through the door, and he's like, okay, it's her sister. It's cool. Everything's fine. And then Miss England on the bed says, "Good morning, Mom." He opens the window and starts putting one leg out, getting ready to jump. And they look at him like he's crazy, and he now realizes that Mom has just brought them breakfast in bed. So from here, he finishes breakfast, heads back to base.
That's like a
sitcom. Boxing and getting ready for this big boxing event. Now, the cool part about this boxing event, at least to me, is that it's for 7th Corps, and another member of 7th Corps is Lafayette Poole, aka War Daddy, the greatest American tanker of all time. This is the guy that the movie Fury is based on. I haven't seen that movie. On him, and in that video, I talk about how when he was in England, right around this time period, he had a boxing match with Joe Louis, aka the Brown Bomber, the world heavyweight champ. Now, I can't tell you with absolute 100% certainty. There could have been multiple events, but I think it's pretty likely that Matt Urban actually scheduled and organized the event where Lafayette Poole, War Daddy, boxed Joe Louis. Which honestly has nothing to do with the overall story, but it is really cool to see my videos overlap, and just the idea that Matt Urban at some point was coaching Lafayette Poole at boxing is just awesome.
Yeah, I would say there's probably a good chance that that's how that went down.
After the event, they start training for an amphibious landing. Matt gets promoted to captain. He also gets caught up on awards. He gets awarded a Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Hearts, all kinds of stuff. From here, they get packed up and shipped off to Normandy, where they make their landing on Utah Beach. Just so we're on the same page, this is not like D-Day. They were not the initial wave of the attack on Normandy. That was on June 6th. They hit Utah Beach on June 11th, 5 days later. So by the time
they'd already like established a foothold
there. The fighting has moved further inland. They land on Utah Beach, and they actually have to follow like roped off sections where they've cleared small pathways through minefields and German objectives. From here, they make their way into hedgerow country. They get to the front lines and they start clearing fields, hedgerow after hedgerow, and eventually they come up.
I mean, with mining being as major of a thing as it was, you kind of had to take it slow and clear areas little bit by little bit, because otherwise there was a good chance you would be walking through a field and step on a piece of the ground that explodes.
Resistance, and these Germans have 2 Panzer tanks, and they don't have any tanks.
That's not good.
Despite that, Matt Urban and his guys dig in and start fighting. They're picking off the German infantry that's trying to use the tanks as cover, but the machine guns on top of the German tanks are wreaking havoc on his men.
So the question is, what do you do about the tanks themselves? Because, you know, the weapons they have on them are going to be good for, taking out the people. But, you know, you shoot a gun at a tank, it's going to, for the most part, just kind of not really do much. That's kind of the point of tanks, is they're designed to be able to take a hit from regular weapons while also just blowing holes through anything it feels like blowing a hole through. So I know the ways that you could conventionally do it, unless you had something big enough to punch through it, would be like if you could get close to it and actually fuck with the people inside the tank, or like get like an explosion underneath the tank to potentially just fuck with the treading, or just, get it off balance, or not off balance, but like so it was not upright anymore and prevent it from moving anymore. That's kind of, I know how you would normally go about it, but I don't know what they're going to be doing against, a bunch of them.
Men are starting to take casualties, and Matt Urban remembers he's the main character, and if anybody's going to do some gangster shit, it's going to have to be him. At which point, he goes to his men, grabs a bazooka, runs into
bazookas will do it too.
And fires the bazooka at one of the tanks, scoring a direct hit, knocking it out. He then reloads the bazooka and fires it at the second tank, scoring another direct hit, knocking out
that's impressive.
By himself in a matter of like a minute. And as soon as that second tank is hit, German reinforcements arrive with another Panzer tank that drives through one of the hedgerows, and it starts opening fire on Matt Urban's men again. So he starts reloading his bazooka as the German turret is moving towards him, and it stops right at him. Matt Urban has enough time to think in his head, oh shit, as he goes to throw the bazooka down to take cover, and before he can even let go of the bazooka, the gun fires, the round impacts immediately directly in front of his feet as he is yeeted into the hedgerow behind him. He comes to in the hedgerow.
That's one of those things where not only is it the fact that the impact itself could hurt you, the fall or being thrown back could hurt him, any shrapnel could potentially hurt him. The concussive force alone from a direct hit that close could very well kill you. Like, one thing is, I used to watch, they showed a clip of Deadliest Warrior earlier. I used to watch that show a lot. And one of the things they pointed out is that, it's not just when you throw a grenade, it's not just the shrapnel that's going to blow you apart. If you're within a certain distance, just the shockwave alone can kill you.
Right where he landed, with medics working on him, he has a massive chunk of his calf missing as the medics are about to administer morphine, and they're trying to get other people.
Actually, if it blew a hole in his calf, he's actually pretty lucky he was able to still be, athletic enough to do war things after that, because depending on what part of his calf was blown up and how they repaired it, that could lead to a permanent disability very easily.
Bear him back to the ship.
Here's your knife, but I'm not dead. Yeah. He says he's not dead. Yes, he is. I'm not.
Matt Urban then orders the medics to not give him morphine and just throw a tourniquet on it because he's fucking staying until they win. Right around then, the litter bearers show up as they're supposed to take him back to the hospital ship. Matt Urban climbs on the litter and then, rather than go back to the hospital ship, has them escort him around the battlefield.
I'm also curious because so presumably he just kind of has a tourniquet and some bandages on right now. I mean, let's ignore the fact that he's doesn't have any painkillers, so it's probably hurts like a motherfucker. But a tourniquet, the whole point of a tourniquet is that it cuts off the blood supply so you don't bleed out. But if it's a temporary measure until you get proper treatment. Like, if you don't get blood supply to his leg, he's gonna fucking lose the leg, because you need blood in your body parts for your body parts to function. So there might be a piece he's not telling us.
And this goes on until they repel that wave of Germans, and eventually the battalion surgeon, the head medic for the entire battalion, also an officer that outranks Captain Urban, has to go to Urban and order him to go to the aid station. So they get him back to the beach at a field hospital. 2 surgeons start working on him. They don't have any anesthesia. All he has is a local anesthetic. He is wide awake as 2 surgeons are cutting out necrotic tissue from what used to be his leg.
Yeah. And then, necrotic tissue. If it's so. He actually might have just went out with a fucking tourniquet if his leg is starting to necrose already. That's probably because it's not have any blood going to it. But I will say, they did give him a local anesthetic, so that's going to help with a lot of the pain. It's not perfect. He's still going to hurt like a motherfucker, but it's not quite as bad as he's making it sound, but it's still pretty bad. So yeah, okay, so he might have answered my earlier question of basically, like, he might have actually just gone out with a fucking tourniquet, which is, honestly, it's pretty fucking stupid, but, he has plot armor.
Surgeons laugh. He's done his job as a morale officer. He's keeping morale high. Eventually, he asks the surgeons, okay, how much longer is this going to take so I can get back to my men? And the surgeons are like, dude, you might lose your entire leg. You're done here. You're not going back to the front.
At this point, they just need to give him anesthetic just so he can't move.
You serious?
From here, Matt Urban gets sent back to a hospital in England. From here, he's in the hospital, he's recovering. It's looking like he's going to get to keep his leg, but it's still pretty jacked up. And then after a couple of weeks, more reports start coming in that the fighting in Normandy is intense, and his unit is taking a lot of casualties. About a week after that, some of those casualties start making it to the same hospital that Matt Urban's at, and on one hand, he's happy to see his guys, but on the other hand, he's getting reports of all the guys that also didn't make it, and maybe they would have if he was there with them.
Well, I get his mindset, the idea of, I need to be doing something to help people or to help my men. But there's also something to be said about, if you're not at 100% when you're going into combat, that itself could also be a liability. You could potentially save more people if you wait until you're fully healed before you go back into the fray of things. And it's a calculation you don't really have all the information to make, so you don't really know, but it's something to consider.
He decides that he needs to go back. So he goes, he talks to the chain of command. He tells them he wants to go back. And they're like, no, absolutely not. If that leg gets infected, you're going to lose it. And it's looking like you're going to keep it now. You're not going back into combat. But Matt Urban isn't taking no for an answer. His boys need him. He's got to figure out a way to get back to Normandy across the English Channel.
And then there's also the question. So kind of backpacking on my previous point. What if he did get his wound infected by going out before it was fully healed? What if it did get infected, and what if he did lose his leg? He would be out of commission. Like, he's not going back in with one leg. Or if he is doing stuff with the military, because he wouldn't probably quit, but he would be doing something that is not directly combat related, or not being in the fray of combat. He would have not been able to do a lot of the things he ended up doing. So, like, it was a risk that worked out for him, but it could have very easily not.
So he's sitting outside this hospital on a park bench, and then he sees his way of getting back to Normandy. There's a platoon of 40 guys lined up in formation. The formation looks horrible. Their uniforms look horrible. It's a giant pile of shitbags, and Matt Urban goes and talks to the officer leading them, and he's like, What is this? Who are these guys? Urban then finds out that this platoon of men is unaffectionately nicknamed the Dirty 40, and basically it's 40 shitbags that had all tried to dodge the draft or had faked an injury, basically trying to do anything they could to not get shipped off to combat, and now they've essentially
honestly, I understand
this hospital to do grunt work and labor because nobody trusts them to actually do anything important.
Honestly, I'll be perfectly honest. I'm the kind of person, I wouldn't want to go to combat, so you know what? If I was doing whatever I could to stay out of the getting enlisted, and then they just kind of gave me non-combat grunt work, I'd be like, fine, I'll do it happily.
Basically, nobody wants to deal with them. The officer in charge is just babysitting them, and they're a giant pain in the ass. So Matt Urban offers to take over. He says that he'll start training them. He's got a lot of combat experience. He's a good officer. He's a leader. Let me take it over. I just need something constructive to do. I'm going nuts sitting in my hospital bed all day. The officer is like, yeah, okay, sure, take them. I don't want them. Whatever. For the next couple of weeks, Matt Urban whips these guys into shape the best that he can, and he's not exactly working with the cream of the crop, but he gets them to the point where they're kind of looking like they're soldiers, and convinces the chain of command that this platoon is ready to go see combat in Normandy. At which point Urban
imagine doing everything you can to try to avoid combat, getting into a position where it's like, hey, you're not really happy, but at least you're not in combat, and then a fucking main character shows up and trains you enough to be sent into combat. That must really suck for these guys.
Look, I know I can't be their officer when they're in theater, but I would at least like to travel to Normandy with them and hand them off to the officer that's taking over. And the chain of command lets him do it, so Matt Urban, with a cane and 40 fuck-ups, board a ship, cross the English Channel, make it over to Normandy. He lands on Utah Beach again a second time. He hands off the Dirty 40 to the officer that's expecting them, at which point he's supposed to go get back on the ship and go back to the hospital. But he wanders over to a field medical station where he finds the newest, greenest ambulance driver he can find and orders him to drive him to the front lines where his battalion is. He gets dropped off at the front lines in an active battle. Urban doesn't realize this at the time, but he has just been dropped off right in the middle of Operation Cobra, which happened after Normandy. Basically, the Allied strategy was to back up a little bit and then carpet bomb the ever-living shit out of the Germans. The Germans in this sector that his men are fighting, once they backed up to allow for the carpet bombing, ran up and occupied the fortified positions that they had just had weathered the storm of the bombing. And now they're using those fortified positions against them. Matt comes hobbling up.
Yeah, and that is one of the pitfalls of building defensive structures, is that if you lose them, now the enemy has them. Which actually is kind of one of the reasons a lot of old school like architecture was the way that it was. One thing you'll ever notice, if you ever look at a lot of ancient cities, you'll notice that a lot of times the fortifications happen in layers going like upward, like that slopes up into the center of the town. And the reason for that is that it's good for fighting people coming in from the outside, but it is a disadvantageous position going in from the inside if you've lost a layer of fortifications and they're trying to push through the next one, it's not a good position to go further like that. And even like if you look at a lot of castles, when they have towers and the spiral staircases often curve clockwise. And that's because, since most people are right-handed, when people are fighting up those stairs, they'll have their sword in their right hand, and they won't be able to swing it super effectively because it's kind of getting blocked by the walls, because their sword hand will be on the inside. Meanwhile, the person defending it will have the sword on their right hand, and that'll be on the outside, so they'll have more maneuverability, making it harder for the person to fight upwards. So it's not super relevant here, but you know, it's an interesting thing to consider. And again, that kind of ties into the point of you'll lose a structure. Now the enemy has that structure, and is there a way to make it so that your advantage doesn't become their advantage?
Kane gets into a depression with some men. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on. The Germans are shooting at them, and he's like, who's in charge? Nobody knows who's in charge. Apparently, the company commander has been killed. At this point, Matt Urban, with his cane, is like,
okay, I'm in charge.
Starts issuing orders to his men to spread out so they don't get taken out by a single mortar, and starts getting everything going. As he kind of gets his footing and evaluates what's going on, they had 3 tanks that were supporting this company. 2 of them have been knocked out, and the other one is kind of sitting in a no man's land. It's operable, but nobody's manning it right now. They've got to get to that tank, get it up and running, and start using it for suppressing fire on these German machine gun nests. Matt Urban sends 2 guys out to the tank to man it. Both of them wind up getting mowed down, at which point Matt Urban is like, I guess I'm doing it. He then proceeds to hobble run through German machine gun fire, makes it to the tank, climbs on top of it to the 50 caliber machine gun, and starts laying down suppressing fire, giving enough cover for a tank commander to run up and get inside the tank. The tank then starts moving towards the Germans, providing cover and suppressing fire as the entire battalion starts moving with him. And they crush the Germans. Matt Urban showed up injured to a...
You know, when you're at a stalemate like that, sometimes it only takes one thing to break that.
Was in shambles and turned the entire tide of the battle in a matter of minutes. One of the platoon sergeants that was there that day, that had been a replacement troop that had come in after Matt Urban had already been shipped to the hospital, had this to say, quote, one of the craziest officers suddenly appeared before us, yelling like a madman and waving a gun in his hand. He was probably a replacement, never in combat before. He got us on our feet though and gave us our confidence back and saved our lives. Another platoon sergeant had this to say, quote, Urban moved forward, and damned if the U.S. Army didn't move forward also. He bellied up to the tank.
A lot of these officers really did have, like, these soldiers did have a way with words.
Took heart with Urban aboard. The tank roared forward, and Urban tore the hillside apart with that gun. Because of this, his battalion commander writes him up for the Medal of Honor and ships off the paperwork. Urban stays with his men as they continue advancing further into enemy territory. About a week later, on August 2nd, he takes shrapnel to his chest and is told that he needs to go back to the hospital.
Yeah, shrapnel.
He promptly refuses and stays in the fight anyways.
That, again, shrapnel is also another issue because it can cause problems depending on how it ends up landing inside you. Like, is it going to be near an artery? Because if, you know, you take a hit, you know, just like a concussive hit to your chest, if the shrapnel's right next to an artery, it could slice the artery open. Depending on how things are, it could be, you know, get into the middle of a muscle and that could fuck with your mobility. It could get infected. Like, when you get shrapnel, you got to get that dealt with.
After that, on August 6th, his battalion commander is wounded in combat and he's shipped off, and now Urban is the commander of the battalion. From here, Urban leads the 2nd Battalion of the 60th Infantry Regiment into combat, and they are taking town after town after town. And again, on August 15th, he's wounded and refuses to get medevaced. And this
that could end very badly. Like, you know, the medical exists for a reason, and sometimes you just got to say, you know what, maybe I could fight a little more, but this will ensure that I can continue to fight no matter what, even if I don't fight anymore today.
Goes from a running joke that started back in Sicily to an actual badass nickname because he is a legend among his men. This dude got shot by a tank, survived, got sent to a hospital in England, escaped the hospital, made it back to the front lines, saved their ass in the middle of battle, and has been injured 2 more times and refused medevac. He's unkillable.
Yeah, that is true.
He might actually be dead, and he is a ghost leading them into combat.
I mean, he does have the morale. I'll give him that.
Under leadership, the 2nd Battalion of the 60th Infantry Regiment kind of becomes known as the Project problem solvers for the 9th Infantry Division. Whatever the toughest mission is, that's who they're giving it to. And on September 2nd, 1944, that tough assignment was to take out Philippville, where the Germans had concentrated all their defenses. If they can take out Philippville and clear out the Germans, they'll have a direct shot at the Meuse River. Now, the problem is that the 9th Infantry Division is not in control of that sector, so the 9th Infantry Division loans out the 2nd Battalion of the 60th Infantry Regiment to a different division to have them go clear out Philippville. So when Matt Urban and his battalion show up, they are told by this new chain of command to basically run into the town into enemy gunfire and just take it over. No artillery support, no air support, no backup.
That's going to be a clusterfuck.
Good day, sir.
Now, why would they do that? I'm not quite 100% sure, but I'm fairly confident it's because this is the point of the war where now it's not a question of is America going to win? It's a question of how soon is America going to win? And a lot of high-ranking officers want to be the first guy into Germany.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The first person to do this, the first person to do that. Basically, they want to overachieve to, you know, win a medal or something. And in doing so, a lot of the time they put their men on the ground at an increased risk so they can make themselves look good. And I think that's what's going on here. Regardless,
that makes sense.
Attempts to follow orders. He approaches the town, and as they approach, they get hit with a humongous artillery barrage from the Germans. Matt Urban orders his men to pull back out of artillery range and then radios back to them like, hey, we're not going to be able to do this without artillery support or air support.
And they're going to tell them to
It's
fucking
not
do it
possible.
anyway.
We're going to get decimated before we even make it into the town. The colonel in charge of this operation then tells Matt Urban, that's not available right now, just push into the town. Again, I'm assuming because the artillery hasn't caught up and they're outrunning supply lines and they're outrunning all their logistical support because they're pushing further in as fast as possible, trying to make the officers look good. Matt Urban then tells them, we'll wait for the artillery support. I'm not going to go in there and get all my men killed for no reason. And the colonel then threatens to have him court-martialed and calls him a coward.
Okay.
To which Matt Urban replies, do whatever you got to do. I'm not sending my guys in there.
Okay, I can appreciate that. It's like it's a bad situation where he probably personally would have been willing to do it, but he's also knows that it's going to get people killed unnecessarily. So honestly, I respect that he can actually have that level of awareness and chill about the whole thing.
Colonel does is he calls up all the new reinforcement troops from the rear that just got here from America that have not seen combat and orders them to march past Matt Urban's unit and straight into the town. And to nobody's surprise, not only do they not take the town, they don't even make it to the town because they get lit up by German artillery. They take so many casualties, in fact, that night, the general in charge of that colonel who's in charge of Matt Urban decides to have a meeting with the two of them and a bunch of other officers.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, doing things like that, unnecessarily sending people to a situation like that really should be criminal.
To come up with a plan on how they're going to take this town. The colonel explains to the general he thinks that they should push in right now with everything that they have, and Matt Urban says, we're going to get absolutely destroyed by German artillery. We need you to get artillery up here to silence the German artillery, and then I will take my regiment in there and we will clear out the town. It's what we do. The general immediately sides with Matt Urban, says he's going to get artillery moved in there first thing in the morning, at which point the colonel throws a bitch fit, telling the general that this man is a coward and he should be court-martialed and he doesn't know what he's talking about. The general then snaps at the colonel. I'm paraphrasing, but roughly what he says is, if he had followed your orders yesterday, him and all of his men would be dead. That man is Matt Urban. I specifically requested him and his unit from the 9th Infantry Division come help us with this because they're one of the best units in the entire fucking war. That man signed himself out of the hospital and saved his unit.
I wish we could have had this conversation recorded. I would have loved to hear what this guy actually said.
Instrumental in spearheading the entire breakout. He then turns back to Urban, who's shocked that this general even knows him by name, and says, you're gonna have whatever you need first thing in the morning. Go get it done.
I bet somebody feels pretty stupid right now.
Matt Urban leaves the meeting like, all right, I got what we need. Let's go figure out what we're up against. So he grabs two NCOs. This is like 11 o'clock at night on September 2nd, and they sneak up to the enemy position. They kill several guards with garrote wire to figure out what the enemy has for defenses. After they take out the guards, they get eyes on the enemy position. It looks like there's an entire German regiment there.
Okay.
They've got tanks. They've got machine gun nests. It's going to be a fight. From here, they make it back to their lines. Matt Urban sets up the battle plan, gets a couple of hours of sleep, wakes up at 4 a.m. on September 3rd.
Again, once again, sleep deprivation's a motherfucker. He's not, I mean, again, adrenaline's going to compensate for some of that, but it can only do so much.
All of his men ready and into position, ready to launch this attack, and they wait until 5 a.m. when the humongous artillery barrage from the Americans hits. to silence the German artillery. They storm the town. It's going as good as it can. Obviously, they're taking casualties, running into German machine gun fire, but it's going as well as you could possibly expect. As they advance further into this town, they get pinned down by German machine gun fire, at which point Matt Urban decides he's going to do Matt Urban things and rushes the German machine gun nest, throws a grenade into it, blows it up, runs to the next one, hucks a second grenade into it, and then feels like he got hit in the neck by a fucking sledgehammer and drops to the ground. He hears the grenade go off and the gun goes silent, and then he wakes up with medics sitting over him, and it's not just any medic, it's the battalion surgeon. He starts to come to a little bit more. He's wet, covered in a ton of his own blood, and he can't move, not because he's physically unable to, but because one of his soldiers has both of his thumbs pressed into the bullet hole in his neck, trying to stop the bleeding, as the surgeon is trying to work on.
Getting shot in the neck, that you got some pretty important blood passages in your neck, and you can't exactly put a tourniquet on that. So that's a very, like, there's a reason a lot of people die from when they get a neck wound like that.
So Matt Urban's laying there trying not to move, and then the priest from the battalion winds up making it there, and Matt Urban remembers the priest asking the doctor, is he gonna make it? And the doctor looks over to the priest and just shakes his head no. Matt Urban hears this. He thinks he's gonna die. All of the men around hear this. They think that their fearless leader, the unkillable ghost, has just been killed, and the last time they see him, he's getting read his last rites on the battlefield by that priest before being loaded up onto the hood of a Jeep and driven to the rear.
Oof. So I'm sure he's going to answer this, but I wonder, like, if it's kind of assumed that he's not going to make it, that's kind of where medical treatment's going to, for the most part, stop. So I wonder what it was that made him so he didn't die. Like, was it just the treatment he already got happened to work, or did somebody decide to put a little bit of extra work into him to, you know, do a Hail Mary to try to save him?
Matt Urban survives and actually makes it to the aid station somehow, and once he gets there, whether he realizes it or not, he is triaged. Meaning he is sorted into a category of how severe his wounds are, which is going to determine how quick he gets treatment. There's basically 4 categories. There's urgent, which means this guy can survive, but we need to get him to surgery right now. He's on the next ambulance out of here to an operating room or to a hospital. Then there's delayed, which means this guy's critically wounded. He needs surgery. He needs better care that we can't give him here, but he's stable for the moment. If somebody else needs that ambulance more, take it. Then there's minimal, which is like walking wounded. This guy's messed up. He needs care. He can't go back into battle. We need to get him to the hospital, but he's stable. He's fine. Then there's expectant for a while. And then there's the 4th category that Matt Urban gets sorted into, which is expectant, which means his wounds are so bad that he's going to die. There's nothing anyone can do for him. So
I mean, the same thing happened when I watched his video on, I think it was Simo Heha, the White Death, because he got shot in the face with an exploding round, and he was triaged into expectant. I think he was thrown into a mass grave before he just people realized, oh shit, he's not dead.
Not going to waste,
and he was sorted
on the transport
in triage the same way.
People that have a chance at surviving. So he is basically shoved into the corner, receives the minimum amount of care, basically just trying to comfort him until he dies. But he doesn't die. He lays there for 2 days with a hole in his neck, and eventually it gets to the point where he gets so thirsty, he's getting all his fluids from IVs, but that doesn't do much to actually, you know, quench your thirst in your throat.
That's a good point.
He starts writing on a piece of paper, asking the nurses for water. After asking multiple times, they eventually come up with like a cup of water and a teaspoon and pour a teaspoon of water into his throat, which sends him into a coughing fit for what seems like forever and is extremely painful.
Yeah, coughing.
All right, no more of that.
It's rough.
Winds up getting transported to a hospital back in England again. Once he gets there, he's evaluated by the doctor that's kind of his new primary care guy, and, you know, he's writing on paper to communicate because his vocal cords are completely shot, and he basically tells the doctor that he can't drink, but he's super thirsty. He tells the doctor they tried giving him a little bit of water with a teaspoon, sends him into a coughing fit. It's extremely painful. It just is a shitty situation. The doctor looks over to the nurse and is like, go in my office, 3rd drawer down in my desk, there's a bottle of bourbon and a shot glass. Bring it here. He then proceeds to pour Matt Urban a shot and tells him to drink it in 1 gulp. Matt Urban's like, okay, you're the doctor, fuck it, expecting this to hurt extremely bad, takes the shot, goes right down like it was nothing. Matt Urban's shocked.
That's
the
crazy.
doctor then explains to him, yeah, trickling water down your throat 1 little teaspoon at a time would make anybody cough, neck wound or not. Your vocal cords are shot. You might never talk again, but you can at least eat and swallow.
Okay.
Just drink. I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another.
From here, he's up and walking within a couple of days, and then within a week, he's requesting to go back to combat by writing it down on a sheet of paper, saying
Jeez,
that he
this
can
guy is
still lead
fucking
his
nuts.
troops by writing the commands. To which he is told, absolutely fucking not. So he waits for a couple of days and then requests 5 days of leave to go up to Scotland to, go sightseeing or whatever. For his
And yeah, I think, the foreshadowing's pretty obvious here. He's going to use that leave to get the fuck back into combat because he's a crazy person. Okay.
personal morale, and they give it to him. He then proceeds to snag a ride on a cargo plane across the English Channel and then hitchhike all the way into Germany where his men are. He gets to where his troops are at and he steps out of the Jeep, and the first thing anybody says as they're all standing there with their jaws on the floor is, "Holy shit, he really is a ghost."
What the hell are you? No! No! No!
From here, it's a party. All the boys are pumped. They're super excited that their leader actually survived. He really is the unkillable ghost that they all thought he was. From here, Matt Urban hangs out with the boys for a couple of days, and they're getting ready to mobilize again to go back into Germany and finish this war. And Matt Urban is straight up ready to go with them. He's ready to write orders down on a sheet of paper and get back into combat. The chain of command, on the other hand, is absolutely not willing to let that happen.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, again, as much as we're praising this guy for being, an absolute, like the Terminator, we also got, I do understand the chain of command being like, hey, maybe just fucking don't.
Him back to the hospital, and then he gets shipped back home to America. And at a glance, it might appear like him escaping from the hospital, making it all the way to Germany was a waste of his time, but it wasn't.
Morale,
it was actually extremely important. Because you got to remember, Matt Urban's the morale officer. He is in charge of making sure the men are motivated to fight. And Matt Urban is really living up to his role as morale officer because he's done incredible things for their morale, because there's nothing that can be more devastating to a combat unit than seeing their star guy, their best player, the man that's fearless, that they follow into battle, that they're trusting to get them back alive. To see him die in combat on the field is devastating, because every single dude is now thinking, Matt Urban was better than me. I was going to follow that guy anywhere. And if they killed him, what chance do I have?
Yeah, and then also, I think it's also kind of neat. Like, he basically runs back in. He's almost practically charging headlong into combat before the chain of command basically like has to lasso him and pull him back and say, no, get the fuck back to America. And that way he was kind of able to do the leading them into battle thing without having to actually lead them into battle. And it kind of gets the point across. And, it probably says a lot to the soldiers that he had to be forced out of there, as opposed to him deciding, okay, I've done my time, I'm tapping out.
To have that on your mind for the next 2 weeks, and then to have a Jeep pull up and to see that guy step out, literally coming back from the fucking dead, does unspeakable things to your motivation and your outlook on how this is going to go. Matt Urban makes it back to England, and he is promptly court-martialed because apparently while he was gone for 14 days on 5 days of leave,
he's AWOL,
they had scheduled his award ceremony for his Silver
Oh,
Star,
shit.
and guess who didn't show up? Matt Urban. The military tribunal takes one look at Matt Urban's service record and what happened and goes, yeah, he's not getting in trouble at all. Case dismissed. Also, you're promoted to lieutenant colonel. From here, Matt heads back home to America, winds up retiring shortly afterward, goes back home to Buffalo, winds up moving to Holland, Michigan. Somewhere along the way, he regained his voice, although it is pretty hoarse for the rest of his life. He then spent the rest of his life being a youth athletic coach, working with kids. He wound up being a coach to a boxer known as Cassius Clay, aka Muhammad Ali at one point. And that's it. He just lived out the rest of his life as a normal guy after being one of the biggest badasses on the entire planet. And then in the late 1970s, he caught up with some of his friends from the military, and they asked if he ever got that Medal of Honor that he was recommended for. And he said, no, doesn't really know what happened to it, didn't really care, wasn't doing it for the medals anyways. Some of his friends then wrote into the government asking them to correct this oversight, and they dug into it. But the problem is that a couple years prior, in 1973, there was a major fire at the National Archives.
Yeah, this was still when like all the records were still physical.
Most of the documentation from World War II had been destroyed. And almost all of it from the 9th Infantry Division was destroyed. All of it except for literally one box of documents was recovered.
Wow.
And in that box was the recommendation from his now deceased battalion commander recommending him for the Medal of Honor. This, combined with testimony from some of the surviving members of his unit,
what a stroke of luck,
would lead
really.
to him ultimately getting the Medal of Honor in 1980. And with that, he is then put into contention for the title of the most decorated soldier of World War II, comparable only to Audie Murphy.
Yeah,
And that
okay,
is
that's
the story
crazy.
of Matt Urban, one of the greatest infantry officers in American history. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel.
Yeah, that guy just kept going and didn't stop. Okay, I'm gonna. I know he always has a ending thing, so I'm gonna wait for that.
This guy is probably one of the most horrifically underrated and underpublicized people I've ever covered.
Okay, so yeah, that was Fat Electrician. Oh wait, there's still more. Never mind. I'm gonna wait.
Trying to be a model. I think being a model, dress up.
Yeah, it's a little quiet.
On the other side of the tracks, you know, we had all races, all colors, and just tremendous. That I'd come in, I'd always be clean shaven, clean shirt on, trying to model for the youngsters. I'd park my convertible right in front of the place. And I think all this is what they picked up. It's a goal that hey, when I grow up, I want to go to college. The thanks and the appreciation they give to you. I meet these kids. I make trips back home, and when I talk to them, you can see it in their eyes. You can see it in their conversation. And they look up to you like they went to a father. And boy, you just can't buy that.
Okay. Yeah, that was okay. He seemed like he really took to his post-military life in a way that a lot of soldiers, especially the really decorated, the really crazy ones, don't always do. But yeah, so that was Fat Electrician's video on the Ghost of World War II, Matt Urban. That was a really good video. I really enjoyed it. That hour well, it was an hour for the video. It's almost 2 hours for this reaction, but that just flew right by. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I learned a ton about that. Learned a little bit about the North African campaign, which is something I didn't know a lot about. But once again, for those watching on stream right now, I'm going to be leaving a link in the chat right now. In those watching on the video after the fact, I'll be leaving a link in the description. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you in a couple days for a new video. Later.